I'm Susan. I love to teach. I love to cook. So let's get going. Oh, and don't ever be afraid to cook. Welcome to my cooking space, the hot stock pot. Let's pick a recipe. Ooh, South African malva pudding. Wow, this is a delicious dessert. It's the national dessert of South Africa, and you'll be able to see why it's delicious. So the first thing we do after washing our hands is to grease the pan. Now this is an 11 by 7 baking dish, which is what we use for this recipe, not your normal 9 by 13. So let's get started. I prefer doing it with my fingers. I feel like I get a better feel for where the butter's going. You're kind of getting right into the recipe right from the beginning by using your hands. Okay, so this is what it's gonna look like. See how nice that is? All right, we're gonna just put it off to the side until we are ready to pour the batter in. The first thing we do now is to measure all the dry ingredients into a nice medium-sized bowl. So we're gonna use 2 cups of flour, and this is the proper way to measure flour, not going in and scooping it out. You don't want to pack it down too much. And then we just level it off with a knife like that. So we have 2 cups like that. We don't push it down, we just kind of tap it. 2 cups. Then we add 2 teaspoons of baking powder and 1 teaspoon of baking soda and a pinch of salt. That's it for the dry ingredients. All right, then we take a little whisk and we just mix it all up, and then we're gonna set it aside. Okay, so that's the dry ingredients. I forgot to mention something very important. We use a 1/4 cup of butter to grease that pan. I know it seems like a lot, but it will make a difference. So, please don't try to cut down that butter. It's a 1/4 cup, half a stick. All right, the next thing we're gonna do is build the wet ingredients in a saucepan, and we heat it. So there's 2 tablespoons of butter and 1 cup of sugar. And we do the sugar a little differently. We can scoop the sugar because it doesn't really compress like flour. And we, even it out with the knife again. We put that into a small saucepan with the butter. So the next thing we're gonna add is the apricot preserves or apricot jam. Now, apricot jam is something that's used very commonly in South African cooking. The thing about malva pudding, though, is that it's not really an African dessert, South African dessert. It actually is a Dutch dessert. It came from the Netherlands when the Dutch settlers first settled in South Africa in the early 1600s. So this recipe, even though it's considered the national dessert of South Africa, is really a Dutch kind of recipe. So we're going to add the apricot jam to the sugar and the butter, and then we're going to add 2 teaspoons of apple cider vinegar. All right, then we're going to heat it on medium heat just till it melts. All right, so we're stirring this. And this is done. It's all melted, and you can see what it looks like. It's nice and liquidy. So now that the apricot jam mixture is done, it's cooling. It has to cool for 5 or 10 minutes. We're gonna start getting ready to make the batter. We're gonna crack 2 eggs and beat them lightly. The next thing we do is we beat some eggs, 2 eggs in a bowl. There's a shell here. Don't include the shells. All right, we just set it aside, and then we have 2 cups of milk, and we're going to be adding those to the batter later. So now we take the mixture that has cooled, and this apricot mixture kind of serves as the foundation for the batter. All right, so everything in the bowl. Then what we're going to do is add our dry ingredients from before, and we're going to add the flour mixture in 3 additions and the 2 cups of milk in 2 additions. I can count, really. It doesn't look that way, but I can. All right, so this in thirds, and then we're going to mix it in. Then we're going to add half the milk and continue mixing. You don't want to use a beater, an electric mixer or anything like that. You don't want to introduce too much air into this because it's a nice, rich, thick cake. And it's called pudding. It's kind of a cake pudding. It's kind of a cross between a pudding and a cake. And it's almost like tres leches cake. You know, when you see it, you'll understand why. All right, so then we're going to add the second addition of the flour. And the reason we add the flour in 3 separate additions is we don't want all the flour in all at once so that it forms too much gluten and gets kind of tough. We want it to be nice and tender. Make sure you get all the flour that's sticking to the sides of the bowls. You want it all in this batter. And then finally the rest of the batter. You want to try to avoid over mixing too. You don't want to mix it too much. You don't want to beat it too much. All right, now we're going to just throw in these eggs. And by throw, I mean gently pour. We're going to pour this and bake it. So it goes in here. That's it. Into the oven we go for, let's see, I think 30 minutes. I can't remember. I'll check and tell you later. So I checked my recipe, and it actually has to bake at 350 for 30 minutes. So that's a good time to clean up all the mess you just made. See you soon. What we have to do next is let this cool off a few minutes, and in the meanwhile we're going to make our sauce. So I've washed out my little saucepan, and we're going to make a sauce while this cools. It doesn't have to cool too long, just it has to set. All right, so what we're going to do here is in the saucepan mix a half a cup of heavy cream and half a cup of regular milk. And I'm just going to wash out the cream and get all the cream. And then 1 cup of sugar. And then 1 cup of butter. I'm sorry, 1 stick of butter. All right, a whole stick. Yes, this is a very low-calorie pudding. No, I'm just kidding. Lots of butter, but it's worth it. It really is. We're just going to heat it until it's melted and warm, and then you'll see what we do next. Next is the poking. This is poking. We're going to poke a cake. So we can use a skewer to poke, or we can use the handle of a measuring spoon to poke, or even the fat end of a chopstick to poke. Your choice. Anything you want. But the bottom line is you want that sauce that we're making to soak into this cake. So I'm just going to poke a ton of holes in here. Don't be afraid. Like that. Time to pour the sauce. This looks pretty scary, but it will soak in. So this is what it looks like when you first pour it. And I know it looks kind of questionable. It will soak in and make the pudding the consistency that you want. So don't get nervous if this is what you see. After it rests for about 15 or 20 minutes, this will look amazing. So I promise you, this is good. All right, so now we're done. It's finished and it looks wonderful. And you can see that the sauce has soaked in on the sides. And we're gonna try it now because it's so good. All right, so let's cut a piece. You can see that the consistency is kind of halfway between a cake and a pudding. Look at that. And now the moment we've all been waiting for, especially me, because this is so good. This is like my favorite dessert. You have to taste this. It is so good. It's great when it's warm. It's good when it's cold. You could always nuke it, you know, but just right out of the oven, it's just amazing. Give it a try. See you next time.